Καλώς ήρθατε σε άλλο ένα Thessaloniki.net Meetup. Δυστυχώς για άλλη μια φορά virtual. Και πάνω που είχαμε λίγο αισιοδοξία ότι μπορεί να καταφέρουμε να βρεθούμε από κοντά, έχουν πάει τα κτίσματα τόσο πολλά. Σήμερα έχει πάνω από 800 στην πόλη, που νομίζω ότι δεν θα τα καταφέρουμε στο πολύ άμεσο διάστημα να το οργανώσουμε από κοντά, αλλά το έχουμε προτεραιότητα. The event is going to be in English. I see somebody is asking, but I'm just doing the introduction in Greek. Sorry about that. So, okay, I don't want to waste any more time. Today's topic is CQRS, and we have George from We Are Tales that he will tell us all about it, and we'll give a stage to him without wasting more time. Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, how do I share screen? I can't share screen. Let me check it out. I think I'm good. Looks like everything is okay. Do you see the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. So, Stratos, thanks so much for organizing that, and hello to everyone. So, Stratos actually said all about it. There's no way we can cover that, but at least I'm gonna talk about some things that I consider important, and we'll just go through the topics that I implemented the last 3 years at WeAre8. Now, the head is like building a time machine with CQRS and event sourcing, and time machine because event sourcing brings time in perspective. Let me see, how do I change that? It looks good. Okay, cool. So, name George Taskos. My official title is CTO at WeAre8. We're an international company with footprint in United States of America, UK, and recently, the last couple of months, we created offices in Thessaloniki, and you are welcome to visit at any time. The development center here is currently under construction, but we have around 12 people joining us till end of November. We're constantly looking for engineers, so feel free if you want to learn what positions are open, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or come by. We're coming on with Kalapathaki corner, right in the city center, the historical center of Thessaloniki. CTO is a fancy title, but I'm a programmer since '95, maybe earlier, I don't remember. Avid traveler, traveled around 15 countries, still looking to do that. As Stratos said, things are not looking great, and that is very sad for everyone. I love vinyl. I collect vinyl all my life, pretty much. I drink whiskey, not all my life, after 17 years old, and I can argue at any time that Star Trek is better than Star Wars. I work at WeAre8 the last 3 years, and this is where we actually implemented CQRS, event sourcing. We brought DDD in perspective. All right, WeAre8 actually is a digital advertising platform. We connect brands and users. So we fuel campaigns, as we call them, sponsorships, that are short videos that you answer some questions and you give some feedback to the brand, to users, and they get paid for that. But at the same time, we contribute money to a charity. This is a mandatory thing in our platform, and that's why we're a big corporation, which is one of the highest standards, actually, as a tag, I would say, because certified big corporations, they balance profit and purpose, which purpose is the good for the planet, no matter how you do that. So we just leave that to some selected charities that we have. If you need more information, reach out again. All right. Well, have you ever watched this movie, by the way? I guess you did. That would be nice, Strado, if we were in physical spaces. I guess the habit won't go away. I would say, who heard of event sourcing? Would get some raised hands. There is something in Zoom, never tried that before. Maybe we could. How much did you hear while I was muted? How long I was muted, actually?
You were not muted, George. We heard everything.
Oh, cool. Because for some reason I went to mute. Cool. Okay. Now, I would say, what is event sourcing? In simple words, if you put it together, event sourcing is an audit log. Okay, it's just building your state from the beginning of time. Like, I would like to know how many can you build your state from scratch? Of course I can't, because I would like to see cameras and hands up, but we can't do that. But would you ever argue in your organization, what is the source of truth? How did you get to the point that you are? Like, how did this state in a database build up to represent that application model? That is where event sourcing brings into perspective your data and time as well. Pretty much whatever behavior happened at any time from the beginning, from the start, you can actually go through that and analyze it, process it, do whatever you'd like to do with that, right? That's where it counts. This is Mesopotamia, just a picture I found. Actually, event sourcing goes back to Mesopotamia, that old. They actually found transcripts that have a transaction log, and there's transactions after transactions dated, and they were never really delete anything. They never deleted any record. They were just creating another record that would most probably fix the previous error. That's what one of the basic rules in event sourcing is. Well, that's good, but what is that? A little bit later, I would say it comes to 2007, and we all decided that back then, the older programmers and engineers in the call will remember that we all decided that we should build systems that have a SQL database, right? And you get some messages, you get some data, you put it into your SQL Server, and then you return some response. And that is your input output. This is pretty much a 3-tier normal application that you would build. We call them monolithics, I think, nowadays, before the microservices fever count. That's how we array actually was 3 years ago. When I first joined the company, we had a monolith. It was running in two instances. There was requests and responses down to SQL Server and then back. So at some point, the CEO started asking questions like, give me all these numbers so that I know what my users are doing. How many users are doing per month? I need this reporting for the brand. How did this happen? And all these questions that were so difficult to answer. So we decided to go event sourcing. This is where I joined the company. We always studied the model, we studied the business, and it seemed fit. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet. I'm just saying you can save a lot of trouble if you start putting it into your systems. Again, if we go back to a SQL database, what we used to do is put a little bit domain-driven design there, a couple of models, choose an ORM framework, and everything magically will work, right? No problem at all. Application is running, everything is good, then your CEO counts, and you don't know how to provide a lot of things. I'm not saying you can't, but how many in this call tried from the application state model in database to retrieve aggregations, analytics, and actually generate reporting? We go into ETL businesses, trying to figure out how the state of the data are, maybe some data are missing, or we don't know what was happening before, things that are very, very important. And we went to event sourcing. If you go to event sourcing, you will see that it's nothing new, as we spoke earlier. It goes really, really to the ancient times. But if you look into today and you ask any accountant, they actually do event sourcing. This is the nature of their business. They have transaction logs, an audit log, let's say, and they just write records with a timestamp and exactly what happened and what is the data. Usually amounts of money that are debited, credited, etc. If you go to finance, millions and millions of dollars in systems. If you go to legal, things that matter and you could risk life if you have problems with your data or you don't know how you got to that point. Health domains, they're all event sourced. And it does make sense when you start giving it a little bit of philosophy. I'm going to jump a little bit from event sourcing to the CQRS pattern, the command, query, and responsibility segregation, which used to be CQS when it started. We didn't have the responsibility in the middle. And how we will combine that, we'll see in the next slides. But what I want to put a little bit more attention is, if you guys see, there's like two sides in CQRS. It's the command and the query. And this is where we can separate the concerns in the side of writing data, which is just requests for behavior change. I like to call it like that because any command really boils down to something that happened from some service or some entity in general. Okay, we have the data stored in one side, and then events flow through the system and update the read store, which is the query side of things. You can always see what is the advantage here, and we can examine a little bit further as well later. This is the simplest chart that I found. You have the clients, service interfaces. One way goes to one data storage, that is your event storage, really. This is where you keep all your transaction logging, technically your event logging. And these events are also flow through the system to update some read data store. Could be one or it could be many. Like that. Okay, cool. You know, I didn't want to make this presentation really with little boxes and arrows and a checkout cart or whatever that is. So I just thought to throw some code from VR8 here. Technically, this is just a simple API controller. We use a service called dispatcher. You create an endpoint. You define a command that accepts some arguments, and then the dispatcher will figure out what the handler is for that. And of course, you work with interfaces to resolve that kind of thing. So we wrote actually internal frameworks and libraries that will do that, but technically it's an anti-pattern. You don't build a framework, you just make your life easier. Okay. Pretty much that's a command that inherits from this type of interface, and this is the result. The DDD community, actually the event sourcing community, would argue if all commands should be void. I don't necessarily agree with that, and nor the functional community as well. So it's fine to return something from commands. You have validation in the commands, and that's just a simple command. Now you can notice here the interface iCommand handler. That's how you resolve which command should execute the handler. You can see that you can pass the command there as an argument in the generics. You do some simple work and move forward. All right. Okay, that is a big slide actually. Now, what is your safety net when you build a system, right? So let's say you build a system handling money. Trading systems, for example, have millions and millions of dollars, right? What if a problem happened? How do you understand problems in your system if you don't know how it happened? And importantly as well, when? You might have like logging, you might have auditing, you might have transaction logs. Can you actually prove that you're correct? Do you think you can go through logging and search where the bug might happen? Do you know how this behavior came to the point of today? And what happened really to get to that point? So with event sourcing, I'll go back and I will stress it enough. You can go literally from the beginning of time and see what the behavior was, event by event, for that specific, I'm calling it aggregate ID, that represents an entity. Maybe it would be a causation ID or a correlation ID. Somehow, though, you would tie one event with another, usually an aggregate. But that goes to DDD, which we'll see soon. And based on that, you can figure out how that problem arises. That is my experience so far. And we solve literally major issues that would go into production really way before it happened. Or if something happens in production, you can immediately go to that user, let's say, and find exactly what it happened and how it happened. That is our safety net, and it is proven the last 3 years one of the best ways and patterns, architectural pattern, I would say, to move with our, at least, nature of business. Next slide. All right. So domain-driven design, this is where it comes into the picture as well. This is a simple, I would say, aggregate for an entity called admin. So an admin also have their own event storage, meaning even an administrator, anything that they change in the system, it goes through our event logging. We know exactly what an administrator did to change anything. It could change a user, it could add funds, it could validate the transactions, it could send push notifications, anything that we do internally to promote things to our users or help our users fix things as well. But domain-driven design tell us how to describe the state of our domain, right? If you see there's an email address, there's a password, there's a list of business codes. What it doesn't tell us, though, in DDD is how did we get to the state? And if you notice, there's a method called event action rehydrate mapping. It takes a type of event, and you can pass a function that will run when that event is raised in the aggregate. So, to my experience so far with event searching, the last 3 years, how something happened and why it happened is way more important than freaking what is the value of the change. Because usually we go into the data and we start searching the data, we try to figure out the data and they will tell us a story, but that's more for data science, it's not for us. Like how and why and the behavioral change that happened over time is much more important than what the data are. Nobody will raise a ticket and tell you, I changed my email address to this email address, figure it out. They will tell you, I changed it, but it didn't change. They don't care what the value is. They just care why it didn't happen. And that's where you come in. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the aggregate. The aggregate, an instance of an aggregate, is literally the rehydration of your events for that specific aggregate ID from the beginning of time. Like every time you call an aggregate from your data storage, it will rehydrate event by event, version by version, all of them until it comes to the state of the last event, which is, I would say today, it could be yesterday, of course, at least to the last event that something happened for that aggregate. Any behavioral change, a little bit. That is the beauty, which comes with, many of you, maybe experienced developers, already can say, and what if you have a million of events? But we'll get there. There's a performance hit. Okay. Now, sorry, is there someone who wants to ask something? Okay, someone was unmuted. Okay. Now, this is actually a perfect picture I found, because as CTO in the organization that we are 8, I refuse to delete data. The reason I refuse to delete data is that I have no idea what it will be worth in the future. And you can take all my application state databases, which there are 3 or more. You can delete them and I can just rebuild them. It might take, I don't know, a week or more to rehydrate all the events from the event storage. When I say databases, I don't mean the event storage. This is my audit log. You can never touch it. You can never delete it because it's the source of truth. You always back it up in different regions. You do a lot of things like that. But it doesn't matter how long it will take me. I still have the data, no matter what. I can do whatever I want again with them. I can build multiple models with it. That's another main benefit that we will discuss soon. Also, events are easier to version. Okay, we version the events. Any change on the event, it makes a change to the version. Any property that you add or remove, you will change the version, and then you can build something we call upcasting, and you can handle the version differences. Not ideal, but it's much better than versioning your state. Did you ever version your SQL Server records? Sucks, big time. You never do that. Even if you could, I think it would be really tough. You still don't have your source of truth. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much that's it, right? You can have a new fact that will undo the previous fact, meaning correcting any error or problem that happened before, but you can't get rid of the old fact. That's event sourcing. And accountants do exactly the same thing. When an error happened in their calculations or the invoices or whatever work they do, they never go and delete the transaction. They just add a new one to fix anything that happened before that. Technically, guys, if you know how to ask an accountant anything in the way they understand it, they can answer any question that you might have about event sourcing and how to build your system. They don't know about DDD and all the cool stuff that we do, but they might give you some hints about your problems. Okay, I'm gonna go back to SQL Server. You know, I love it already. So, could you actually search the history in SQL Server? I don't think. You just have a latest application state. By the way, I keep saying SQL Server. I don't want to make it seem that it's a bad database. Not at all. But usually you see patterns that you have a table of transactions, and then you have all the other tables with your application state modeling, which you actually build event sourcing. That's what you did, really, to figure out how to search really your history in a SQL Server or to find something in your history. And your transaction logging table becomes your event storage, really. And I would stress again, will you be able from that transaction log to rerun all your commands, all your behavioral changes to get to today? I think it will be very difficult to run, even with a classic transaction logging, all the transactions that ever happened to find differences in your system. Let's say maybe even before you release something, you might want to do that. It's, of course, performance hit, or it might take you a while to release, but you could do it if you want. That's another story of things. Yeah, I thought to give you a screenshot from our event storage, how it looks like. If you see, it's very simple. There's an aggregate ID, you have a version. You can see all the behavioral changes that a user actually did to get to version 13. Of course, there are more, hundreds of them. And you can see the timestamp. You have exactly, and I have a bit of an OCD with time, so I keep it in different formats as well. But that's a great example of what's going on. Sorry? Oh, Dimitris Arabatis, I think you're unmuted. Right. So I want to go back a little bit because this is the source of truth, which is our event log at the company. And I would like to discuss a little bit what happened if you have, let's say, millions of events, with an aggregate ID or causation ID or correlation, just two different things, would get up to millions of events. Imagine an aggregate trying to build in every command or every behavioral change of that entity, all these events one by one and execute the business logic that you have in your domain model to get to the state today. You will get a performance hit. Okay, that's for sure. Pretty quickly too, maybe in like, I don't know, 100,000 events. So you introduce something called snapshots, and you get snapshot with some kind of logic that you'd like. And maybe you can say, you know, every 10 events, I want to have a snapshot. We kind of overkill it. Every event we get a snapshot, but we can always change it. So that's an easy thing to do. Just at that point, I would like to say that snapshots are temporal and they're just convenient to gain performance. Like, I can delete them and it will be created in the next command, literally. All right, back to, I know we're jumping a little bit back and forth. It's big topics, major topics, a lot of topics that you can search in detail if you want after this call. But we're going back to CQRS, okay? You can see on the left side, we have the client at the bottom and our data storage at the top. It shows one data storage. You could imagine it as two for now. So client sends a message, which is a command. You can get a response. There's a facade, which is our service interface, usually a RESTful API, sits somewhere there. And you have some other application services, which is, again, your internal process. Some domain objects, a lot of things can happen like commands, command handler, the aggregate, and it goes all the way to the right data storage. And on the right side, you have the read side, right? So you just have a theme read layer where you just have data transfer objects pulled from the read data storage, and you just send data to your client, which usually are exactly what the views are views based, I would say, all DTOs. It depends, 99%, I guess. But you can already tell if I go to the next slide. All right, so this is how you separate them. You have commands on the left side where you write in the data storage, and you have all the reads and all the queries on the right side. All right, now that's a big, interesting statement. In my experience, there's never a single model that can be appropriate for reporting, searching, and transactional behavior. Okay, sorry about that. I have to stuff here. Okay, there's definitely going to need one for reporting, one for searching, one for transactional behaviors, one for analytics, most probably, and anything else that any domain of your business will require from you. There's no way you will have one database. You will say, I'm going to write to this database, and then I'm going to read from this database, and based on what they ask me, I'll just go to this database and get stuff. It will never going to happen when you build a big system like the one that we built the last 3 years. It's exactly what I said earlier. Pretty much the client will tell you what type of model they need. It's going to be screen-based because they want to show some stuff. You're going to go somehow aggregate events flying into your system, create a model for this specific view, and just serve it. Right, we're mixing a little bit of DDD here. I'm not going to touch a lot of that, but that is one of the most important rules that I have in the company when we build models. So getters and setters, I consider them a domain anti-pattern. I could argue that it might be easy for you to have a setter and say, birth date equals that date. Maybe you will need it in some case, or it would be okay to have it, but that beats the whole purpose of describing your behavior in your domain and your model. So if you see, all our setters are private because we do things like that. So we try to describe exactly what the behavior is. For example, a user will update a profile picture, and the event raised is influencer profile picture changed with some data. In this case, just a key. You see there's some validation in the domain model as well, or they might update their interests, which it will raise an event of influencer interests changed. A little bit of code for fun. Now, we spoke a little bit about CQRS and the command side and the query side. The main benefit of CQRS is actually scaling. Actually CQRS allow you to come up with a simple model because you're not thinking about both sides of the model. Not thinking both sides of the model, it gives you the opportunity to completely separate them. And one side of the query, you can scale it pretty much as you'd like to. Like you have more users that request more data, you scale that side. Now the right side, you can argue that is a bit more interesting because commands processing all the transactions, rehydrate events, the raise events, some projections services will catch that event and will process it. While that happens, you introduce something that is the main disadvantage of event sourcing, which is eventual consistency. And sometimes you might have to fight a little bit with that, but there's workarounds. And I could argue with you, if it's very, very important and you really, really need it, you could go to your snapshot and give something immediately back, which then you introduce consistency, you break a little bit the pattern, but we all know there's no perfect pattern, so sometimes we just have to do that. At WeAre8, actually, we had to do it only in one case in this whole organization, which brings me to this slide, because most bounded contexts in your own organization, in your domains, they can interact with relaxed consistency, and nobody will ever complain to you. I've seen that happening the last 3 years. Everybody works perfect. They get the data, they get their models, they get their views, their analytics, their numbers. Nobody ever, and actually it's near real time. So it has to be a very unique case that you need to have consistency, at least in our domain, in our business. I'm not saying this is a pattern for everyone, but you can also combine, if you want consistency, with some kind of event sourcing in the background. That can happen as well. We are just pretty much full event source. And of course, relaxed consistency is another term that you can use for eventual consistency. Allows us to increase scalability and availability. And this is the main reason we chose this architectural pattern, because we have pretty much infinite scalability and high availability. the infinite in quotes, because we rely, of course, always somewhere with dependent serverless AWS Lambda. So that has some kind of limitations, but to reach them, you have to have a lot of millions of users per second, I would say, to get there. And I think I'm good on time. Do you have any questions? Ioannis, okay? You can open your...
Hey, George. Can you hear me?
Hey, John, yeah, or Yanis.
Yes, yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was a lovely one. I do have a couple of questions, if you can help me out a little bit, because there are a lot of new ideas and words coming up. So, but main question, okay. Is CQRS and event sourcing just a time series database with some controllers and interfaces in order to facilitate the whole thing?
Yes, okay. That's a good question. I can see why this can be a little bit frustrating or confusing, I would say, not frustrating, because we covered a lot of different things in a very short period of time. And I can tell you, and I should have mentioned in the beginning, that all these things, they can be used individually. So CQRS is a pattern for you to introduce command and query separation in your system, right? You could have CQRS and still have consistency at the back. A command and the messages could go from one way all the way to your database and then come back with a response, of course. And the write the same way as well. The write side could go to the same database if you want to do that. Then this is where you can introduce, in the backbone of CQRS, you can introduce some event sourcing. So your database is actually doing your system, is making your system event sourced. Okay, you have to choose some kind of database that is going to be your event storage, and it will stream any event or command / command, because commands will generate events. Well, actually, let me step back. Commands will have an aggregate, which we introduce domain-driven design and modeling, which will raise events, and you will save them in a database that will stream it to your system. So if you remember, there was a slide there that had the transaction log, all the events and the version and the timestamp. This database, as soon as you insert something in there, it will stream that to my platform. And any service in the system can actually grab that event. But I have it also more domain separated, etc. Then you introduce queues, you introduce event handlers, you do things like that. But to your question, CQRS, you don't have to combine it with DDD or event sourcing. You can use it as is, as a pattern. That's it. Okay.
So basically, you can use, because you mentioned something about dispatchers, so you can basically join the worlds together and have CQRS with the dispatchers and all this kind of stuff, and then have a time series database in order to replay the events, right? And also add a little bit of DDD there in order to make more sense and be more appropriate. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you can do that. Dispatcher, by the way, is just a nice word for a library that I've built, that technically you say, dispatcher, here's the command, you figure out what the handler is. That's all.
No, like a mediator pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So, and I do have another question, because you said that you have some kind of a ledger, right? And from that you can rebuild every state for every database. And I wanted to ask you how, if first of all you have any kind of issues with GDPR requests, are you storing any kind of data there that might need to be deleted? And if not, what would you propose to someone that might need to actually do something like that? Because if you have a ledger, you cannot touch it.
Yeah, actually, that's another great question. How we handle deletion in the platform right now. So if you remember, there's like write database, read database, right? Let's imagine the write database is your ledger, and the read database is some kind of database. It could be SQL Server. It could be, for example, in our case, we use Elasticsearch. So when, let's say, a behavioral change is please delete my account, what we do is we go to our read database, or any read database, because it could be multiple, and you just literally delete the record because we don't care about it anymore. But in your ledger, what we do is we obfuscate the data. We don't delete them. You can actually see all the events for that specific entity, or we call it user in this case, but you just can't see the data. And technically, the data that are only GDPR related, which you should already have them encrypted, right? Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
But then we just obfuscate. You can do things like, encrypt them and throw the keys. Nobody can decrypt them ever, not even you. I would suggest that. So you have the data, you can generate a get modeling. You might not have the GDPR, but you don't care. You can still get numbers, you can still get aggregations, you can still get analytics, you can still get reporting. Even if it's, you don't have the name, who cares? Business don't care about it. They just care about numbers.
Yeah, true. Okay.
I don't like what I said, but it is what it is.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ioannis. Cool. Next one. If anyone has anything to add. Kostas.
Again, thank you for your presentation. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you better now.
I would like to ask, what is the relation between event sourcing and Kafka system? Because I've seen some similarities there. It's just a case Kafka. You can use Kafka as event source. It's completely different things.
I don't think it is completely different things. I think both are it's for event-driven architectures. I would separate it, at least from my experience in my mind. One thing could be event streaming without DDD and all these things. And the other thing could be more pure event sourcing based on your domain. So I think Kafka in general is used, I don't know the technology, by the way, disclaimer, but I believe it's used mainly for the streaming of the data in other services. What is very, very important for an event sourced system is the order. There's no way you can lose the order. If you lose the order, all the behaviors are messed up. So there's no truth there. Technically, what we're using in our systems for the right side of things, in the command side, we use FIFO queues, first in, first out, and everything until you write, until someone handles that event is going to receive everything in order, in FIFO order. And AWS actually helps you do that because they're very familiar with event sourcing, I would say. Most probably Microsoft has the same services as well. So I would be careful to make sure that you can separate your aggregates. First of all, you can query with just an ID. That's all you need for event sourcing, just an ID to get all the behaviors for that specific ID. And then make sure that everything is FIFO. And in any, let's say, bug, you could have a bug, right? In one of the event handlers, let's say projection, that grabs that event and tries to put in the database, something went wrong. What do you do with that? I like things to let them crash. And what happens on the AWS system is that the FIFO queue will just pull back and retry and pull back and retry until you reach some kind of limitation and put it in a dead letter queue, which is not good, but you have around 14 days to do that. So I hope you fix it already. I think these are the two main points that I would think when you choose a technology. So you could choose any technology as long as you meet the requirement.
Thank you.
Next. I think we still have a bit of time, 10 minutes, or we can end that. Strato, Costa, what do you think? I don't see anyone else raising hand.
There are no more questions. Maybe you can spend a few minutes talking about the position we have. I know that you're hiring, yeah, or you're in the hand of some good
Oh,
developers.
sorry, I can't hear very well. So you're talking about okay, job position, right? At We Are 8.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, guys, actually, we're looking. Let's talk about our stack, and we're looking across the whole stack. We do have a core development building up right now, but we have native iOS with Objective-C, native Android, Kotlin. We use .NET Core C# in our whole backend system. There's nothing else running any other language right now, any other runtime in our backend. All the lambdas, handlers, APIs, batch jobs, whatever you can imagine, we're at C# .NET Core. We're looking for .NET Core, iOS Objective-C, Android Kotlin. We're looking for quality assurance engineers. We are looking for more React.js. We already have 2 guys, but we could get some help, more help there. And what else? I said Android, iOS, React.js, quality assurance engineers. We are looking for data engineering as well. So data visualization, data engineering, analytics, all these cool things that the business care a lot. I think I covered all. I don't think anything else. That's it pretty much. So whoever wants to reach out, guys, just feel free to, visit. We are Komninon and Kalapothaki, right? Just one block from Niki, one block from the seafront. So feel free to come by. Let's have some coffee. Let's meet. Let's geek out a little bit. I love that. All the guys that we have here, they're motivated, passionate, they want to learn, they're really amazing. So we're open whenever you want, just come by.
Okay, thank you, George.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Really glad about the presentation. Happy to present. I know, again, it's a lot and we just scratched the surface really, but happy to go in more detail for its specific context whenever you feel like.
Sure, we're always for good presentations, so I hope we will have you again quite soon. So for everybody else, we have another meetup this week. This is quite soon. We usually do 1 per month, maybe 2 per month, but now we have 2 in a week. So next one is on Friday. It's Xamarin, Enterprise Xamarin. And then after that, we're open for suggestions, and we would like to have some proposals on topics or subjects that you'd like to present or to listen about, right? So please reach out, send us an email or a message on Meetup, and we can arrange that. Kostas, do we have any other announcements? Kostas? I guess not.
Not for now.
Okay, guys. So thanks again for being
Thank
here.
you, Stratos. Thank you, Kostas. Thank you, everyone.
Stay
Good night.
healthy. Stay
Thank
healthy.
you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.